Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, so today we're going to tackle a book that, let's be honest, a lot of people skip: Leviticus. It looks like a long list of ancient, kind of weird rules, right? But what if I told you it's actually a really profound story, all built around answering one single, massive question?
And that question is this: how can a perfect being live with imperfect people? I mean, think about the setup. God's glorious presence has just literally moved into the neighborhood. He's living in the tabernacle right in the middle of the Israelite camp. And that creates a huge, immediate problem. How on earth does a holy, perfect God live right next door to sinful, imperfect people without, things going very wrong?
All right, Section 1. A holy God, sinful people. This is all about establishing the central problem. So before we even get to the solutions Leviticus offers, we have to get our heads around the problem. And it is a big one. We're talking about this immense, almost dangerous gap between God's nature and ours. And the word at the very heart of all this is holiness. Now, in the Bible, holiness doesn't just mean being really good. It means being set apart, totally pure, perfect. Think of God's holiness like the sun. It's the source of all life and warmth and goodness, but get too close without protection, and it's incredibly dangerous. It's a raw power source that is just incompatible with anything impure or unholy. So when God says something like this, "Be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy," it completely reframes the book. See, Leviticus isn't just a random list of do's and don'ts. It's a blueprint for a relationship. God is basically saying, I want you to live with me, in my presence. But for that to work, you need a guide, a kind of instruction manual for how to live safely with a holy God. And that's exactly what this book is.
Okay, Section 2, Building the Bridge, Sacrifices, the system for approaching a holy God. So, how do you bridge that gap? Well, the first part of the answer God gives is something really physical, really tangible. It's the whole system of sacrifices. And this wasn't just some chaotic, random thing. It was super organized. God lays out 5 main types of offerings, and each one had a specific job. Think of them like 5 different ways to communicate with God. You had the burnt offering for total surrender, the grain offering to say thank you, the peace offering, which was basically a communion meal, and then, of course, the sin and guilt offerings to deal with wrongdoing and make things right. They were all distinct pathways to God. But underneath all of these rituals, there was one crucial, unavoidable point being made over and over again. Sin is serious. It has consequences. It brings death. And to fix the damage, to atone for it, a life had to be given. The blood of the sacrifice was a constant, visual reminder that something had to die in their place. This idea of a substitute paying the price, it's a huge theme that's going to ripple through the rest of the entire Bible. All right, on to Section 3. Living in God's presence. This is the guide for daily holiness. Okay, but it wasn't just about these big one-time sacrifices at the altar. I mean, what about Monday morning? Leviticus is also the instruction manual for how to live every single day in a way that respects the fact that God is right there in the middle of your camp. So how do you manage that sacred space? Well, God appoints a specific group of people, the priests, to act as mediators. They're the go-betweens, the representatives for the people before God. But, and this is a huge but, they had to do it exactly the way God said. No exceptions. And just in case anyone thought God was being overly picky, that principle gets demonstrated in a super dramatic and honestly a pretty terrifying way, right after the whole priesthood thing is set up. You have Aaron's own sons, Nadab and Abihu, and they just waltz in and decide to do things their way. They offer what the Bible calls unauthorized fire. They basically ignored God's instructions and improvised. The result was instant and deadly. The lesson couldn't have been clearer. God's holiness is not a game. You don't treat it casually. This whole idea of holiness then spills out into every part of life through these laws about being clean and unclean. And it's easy for us to look at these rules about food and skin diseases and stuff and think they're just weird. But they weren't random. They served all these purposes. They were about health, for sure, but they were also packed with spiritual symbolism. They were meant to be constant daily reminders that belonging to God meant being different, being set apart in literally everything you do.
And then you get to the famous holiness code. And this is where it gets really amazing. This isn't just about rituals anymore. It's about how you treat other people. We're talking about commands for justice, compassion, caring for the poor and the immigrant, all from 3,000 years ago. And get this, that famous command, love your neighbor as yourself, everyone knows that one, right? It comes from right here in Leviticus. It's absolutely foundational.
All right, section 4. The day sin was removed. The ultimate reset button. Okay, so you've got all these daily sacrifices, but what about the sins people didn't even know they committed? What about the general collective brokenness of the whole nation? It's like a running tab that just keeps getting bigger. Well, for that, Leviticus builds to this incredible dramatic climax, a yearly day of total reset. This was called the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. It was the most solemn, most important day of the entire year. Why? Because it was the one and only day that one person, the high priest, could go behind the curtain into the Holy of Holies, into God's direct presence, to deal with the sins of the entire nation for the past year. The stakes were incredibly high.
And the ceremony at the heart of this day is just brilliant visual theology. It involved 2 goats. The first goat was sacrificed. Its blood was brought into the Holy of Holies, and it represented that the price for sin was paid. Sin was covered. But then there was the second goat, the scapegoat. The high priest would lay his hands on its head, confess all the sins of Israel, and then send it out into the wilderness, to be seen no more. This symbolized that their sin wasn't just paid for, it was removed, carried away. It's a powerful 2-part picture. Sin is paid for, and sin is gone.
Okay, final section. Why Leviticus matters today. Finding the lasting answer. So we've walked through all these ancient rituals, these laws, the goats. What's the point for us, right now? Why should we care about this book today?
Well, because Leviticus lays down these absolutely foundational truths for the rest of the Bible story. It hammers home 3 things. 1, God is holy. 2, our sin is a really serious problem that creates a barrier. And 3, something has to be done about that barrier. Atonement, a way to bridge the gap, is absolutely necessary. And here's where it all comes together. The New Testament writers look back at this whole elaborate system, the priests, the sacrifices that had to be done again and again, and they say, you see all that? That was a shadow. It was a framework that was pointing forward to something bigger, to a final, permanent solution. In fact, the book of Hebrews just spells it out. It says that Jesus is both the perfect high priest who can enter God's presence, and he's the perfect, final sacrifice. So what Leviticus showed had to be done over and over and over again, Hebrews argues was done once, for all time, through him.
And that totally reframes this whole idea of holiness for us. If at its core, holiness isn't about us achieving flawless perfection on our own, but about being set apart for God, well, that leaves us with a pretty challenging question, doesn't it? What does it actually look like for you and for me to live a life that is set apart for a purpose that's bigger than just ourselves?
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us.